Throughout my travels over the last 5 years, I spent months traveling all around India, visiting tons of different places, from big cities to tiny villages, from sky-high mountains to large plains, from some of the richest areas to some of the poorest slums as well. As a result, a lot of different people have been asking me hundreds of questions about what it was like to travel in India. And that is why I decided to make this video where you will get all of your questions answered. Without further ado, here's everything you need to know about this gorgeous, amazing country, India. India's history is incredibly old, as one of the earliest and largest civilizations, the Indus civilization, lived in India from the year 2500 before Christ. Located in the Indus Valley, this civilization was highly developed. They used tools made from iron, relied heavily on trade, had sophisticated urban planning, and even a written language which remains undeciphered to this day. From there, India saw the rise of the Vedic civilization, which laid the groundwork for the language of Sanskrit and the earliest Hindu texts. As Indo-Aryan people became less nomadic and more urbanized, other major religions such as Buddhism began to arise in the last millennium before Christ. During the medieval period of India's history, the caste system established a strong foothold in Indian society. Islam arrived and political powers began to be more centralized. The largest and greatest of these was the Mughal Empire, which took power in the 16th century. Under their rule, India became more united than ever before, as they were able to unite some Muslim and Hindu kingdoms. The 16th century also saw the arrival of the British, as they set up the East India Company with the permission of Queen Elizabeth I. 2 centuries later, the Mughal Empire began to decline, and the British saw an opportunity to seize control of India and expand their vast empire. The Indian people were very hostile toward the British, and for good reason. The British met any form of rebellion with violence, and there were several massacres of Indian people throughout the British rule. However, it was extremely difficult for the Indian people to fight back, because during the course of the British rule, there were a total of 31 major famines in India, which killed millions of people. The final straw came after World War I, when India experienced an economic crisis that led to food shortages, riots, and a major influenza outbreak. The Indian people desperately needed leadership in their efforts for independence and turned to the now legendary Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi was an advocate for non-violent protest and encouraged the Indian people to be non-cooperative with the British. As a result, Gandhi was arrested by the British in 1922 for conspiracy to overthrow the government and was imprisoned to 2 years. Upon his release from prison, Gandhi continued to travel around India and encouraged people to engage in civil disobedience as a way of non-violent protest, which gained a massive following across the country. In 1943, Gandhi, now 73 years old, was arrested yet again, but this time without any charge, and so began a hunger strike in prison, which lasted for 21 days and was only released when the public's anger to this injustice became uncontrollable. Finally, in the wake of World War II, the British government could no longer sustain their occupation of India and began to write the legislation that would end their rule. And so, in 1947, after 200 years of British rule, India became a free and independent nation. The first thing you need to know about India is that it's not really a country, it's more like a never-ending continent, which makes their nature change dramatically, depending on the region you're in. The north has 2 distinct geographical features, the Himalayas and the Thar Desert, making it both the hottest and the coldest region of the country. The south is known for its dense tropical forests with a lot of biodiversity. No wonder they have as many as 15 amazing wildlife sanctuaries there. The eastern part of India has a very diverse landscape where you can see mountains, valleys, and, of course, freshwater lakes. Finally, the West is famous for being the home to India's richest state, as well as some of the most beautiful beaches in the world that attract millions of visitors every year. The nature in India obviously is incredibly fascinating, but wait until you hear about its people. The Indian people certainly have a lot more fun than most other cultures in the world. Everything that Indians are involved in inevitably has an exciting and loud flavor to it. In certain parts of the country, even funerals are celebrated by singing and dancing. The Indian people also have an incredibly strong sense of family. Only here you can see families with dozens of members and up to 4 generations living under a single roof, sticking with each other no matter what. India could rightly be called the world's capital of religion, as it's the birthplace of Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism, with Hinduism being the most popular religion with over 1 billion people practicing the religion. In Hinduism, cows are considered to be sacred, and they are a very important part of the Indian culture, and thus there are now over 44 million cows here, the highest amount in the world. India boasts one of the most diverse and incredible cuisines ever that varies greatly depending on the region. The northern Indian cuisine is known for having thick, rich, and dairy-heavy dishes that use a wide range of local fruits and vegetables which grow throughout the year. In the south, the dishes are largely rice-based, and there you will find some of the spiciest food in the country. If you have a sweet tooth, then you should definitely head to the east because some of India's most famous desserts come from this part of the country. Finally, the western part of India has a great mix of meat and vegetarian dishes so that everyone can find what they're looking for. Indians are completely crazy about cricket. It is pretty much everywhere in this country. It is by far the biggest sport. In 1983, the India national cricket team achieved arguably the biggest upset in the sport's history when they beat the West Indies, the 2-time defending champions, in the World Cup. The players on that team became national heroes, and since then, India's cricket players are among the most famous people in the country. India also won the 2011 World Cup at home in Mumbai against Sri Lanka, and people celebrated with parties on the streets, firecrackers, flags, and lots of dancing. Cricket is so popular that in the last few dozen years, the number of households in India with a TV jumped from 30 million to hundreds of millions, largely so that people could keep up with their favorite sport. Have you seen that video of me spending 5 days living in the slums of Mumbai? If you thought that's what most of India looks like, check this out. India is the world's fastest growing economy and the 7th largest overall. What is their largest export? All things IT. In 2017 alone, that generated $154 billion in revenue. India is also the 3rd largest hub for startups in the world, with thousands of new tech companies being established every year. Obviously, India still has a long way to go to reach the living standards of some of the other top 10 largest economies, as over 100 million people still live in the slums, but they're actively working towards it. A lot of the slums get redeveloped, new sky-rise apartment complexes are being built, and people get educated to do well-paid white-collar work for national and international corporations. I know I've already told you quite a bit about this beautiful country, but check out these amazing facts you might not have known before. India's film industry, called Bollywood, produces most films in the entire world, over 1,000 films per year, which gain large crowds of viewers as every day around 14 million people in India go to the movies. The city of Varanasi is the oldest continually inhabited city in the world, dating all the way back to the 11th century before Christ. The city was even visited by Buddha himself. Indian scientists were the first people in the world to discover water on the moon, which was a mind-boggling discovery in 2009. Freddie Mercury, the lead singer of Queen, is of Indian descent. He was born a Parsi with the name Farooq Pulsara. Yoga was, of course, created in India about 5,000 years ago, and today has the most affiliated and unaffiliated yoga schools in the world. In 2011, a group of 75 million people gathered for the Kumbh Mela. The gathering was so massive that it was visible from space. Last but not least, India is also known as the land of the spice, since they produce over 70% of the world's spices. If you think that the only place you should explore in India is the Taj Mahal, you are very wrong, my friend. Here are my top favorite touristy places you should explore. Let's start with the Statue of Unity, which is the world's tallest statue that's 182 meters tall and looks absolutely unreal, especially from the distance. Then we have the ancient town of Orcha, which used to be one of the richest Indian cities that's home to some incredibly beautiful forts and palaces you can get lost in. Moving on, there's one of the most popular hill stations in India called Mahabaleshwar that has one of the very few evergreen forests in India, as well as an awe-inspiring canyon and gorgeous mountain roads. Place to visit number 4 is one of my favorite places in India called Hampi, which used to be the world's second largest city in the 14th century that's now become a tiny village with amazing temple ruins, as well as lots of beautiful nature spots. Then there's the world-famous Rani Ki Vaav's temple that has over 500 intricate statues and is so well preserved it's even been called the cleanest iconic place of India. Lastly, the white sand butterfly beach in the state of Goa that will take quite a while to reach but make you feel so good you'll never want to leave it. Trust me, I know, because I've been there. Now that you watched the whole video, you need to promise me 2 things. First off, when you finally get to come to India, please spend loads of time exploring the remote parts of this beautiful country, not only the touristy sites. Secondly, post this video on your social media with the hashtag Namaste and show your friends how much you know about this gorgeous country called India. Thank you very much for watching the whole video and stay curious wherever you are in the world. Boom!